Well, thanks everyone for coming. I'd like to welcome our speaker, Kirby Ferguson, to Google today. Remixing, mashups, and sampling have all been with us for many years now, but the saturation of high-speed broadband has seen an explosion in the access to media and its inevitable resampling and subsequent sharing when that process begins all over again. From established names in music and video to amateur YouTube remixes, the remixes here, and no amount of litigation is going to make it go away. With that, Kirby has produced a 4-part series called Everything is a Remix, and it's not by any means the first film to tackle this subject, but Ferguson brings a methodical, example-led approach to the arguments he presents, and in true internet fashion is funded through crowdsourced donations and the community in general. His compelling style prevents the delivery becoming too academic, but is still extremely informative, and you can find Everything is a Remix as well as a number of other fantastic videos of his, some personal favorites being Punchline Piracy, and I think just Trajan, or Trajan is the font of every movie, at goodiebag.tv. That's his website, goodiebag.tv. So again, let's welcome Kirby Ferguson to the stage.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for coming out, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. So Everything is a Remix, for those who don't know, is a 4-part video series. You can watch it for free online. First part is about music, second part is about film, and the third part is about technology and innovation. Fourth part will be about law and norms, human behavior, how we think about stuff that we think is ours, and that part is written at this point. It will be out in maybe a month and a half or 2 months. So to set the stage, probably the best thing to do is just play a little bit from part 1. This is the first minute from part 1 of Everything is a Remix.
Remix, to combine or edit existing materials to produce something new. The term remix originally applied to music. It rose to prominence late last century during the heyday of hip-hop, the first popular music form to incorporate sampling from existing recordings. Early example, the Sugar Hill Gang samples the bass riff from Chic's Good Times in the 1979 hit Rapper's Delight.
Now what you hear is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat. And me, the groove, and my friends are gonna try to move your feet. These are the good times.
Since then, that same bass line has been sampled dozens of times.
Scene, pulling up with Jodeci, blasting up my 15. I got the good life, no stripe, real nice. And I'm a papa, my son Trey.
Eu sou velho caderninho de telefone, com o nome e o número de monte de mulher. E ele vai ligar.
Skip ahead to the present, and anybody can remix anything, music, video, photos, whatever, and distribute it globally pretty much instantly. You don't need expensive tools, you don't need a distributor, you don't even need skills. Remixing is a folk art. Anybody can do it. Yet these techniques, collecting material, combining it, transforming it, are the same ones used at any level of creation. You could even say that everything is a remix.
All right, so the word remix, what do we mean when we use this term? When we say remix, we typically mean that you're making something new out of something old. So you took existing stuff, you edit it, you combine it, you make something new, but you can still recognize the old stuff in the new thing. So these chunks, the parts of the old stuff, in conventional remixing, those are referred to as samples. So remixing could be thought of as the arrangement and transformation of samples, but I think remix is a good metaphor for any kind of creativity. So copying materials, transforming them, combining them, that's kind of the basics of creativity. And this is opposed to what we have now, which is myths. We have a lot of myths about how creativity happens. We don't have realistic ideas about how ideas happen. We have stories, and they're good stories, but they lead us astray in important ways, I think. So, touched by the hand of God, this is kind of how we traditionally think of creativity. Or this is historically how we think of creativity. So, humans weren't considered powerful enough to create things themselves. So they were essentially channeling God or the gods. Humans were too meager in ability to actually make things themselves. So this is still sort of an idea that we have now. We use terms like talented and gifted that suggest that the ability kind of comes from elsewhere and it's kind of coming through you, but it's not really yours. Then the Romantics came along a couple hundred years ago. Beethoven is an early example, and the Romantics were kind of a reaction to this very limiting role that artists had had up until then. So they claimed their expressions as their own unique voices. So instead of saying it's coming from someplace else, who knows where, it was coming from inside them. Again, they don't know why it's there or who's got it or why, but it was coming from within them rather than being the voice of divinity. Light bulb, can't talk about creativity in a presentation without showing a light bulb. So there's the light bulb, box ticked. This is, of course, an important invention by Edison, or Edison popularized it anyway. But it's also our most popular visual metaphor for how ideas happen. So they happen like that. They happen kind of out of nowhere. There's darkness and then there's light. Boom, you've got it. Happens really fast. The truth behind most creations, though, is it's more of like a sprawling affair. There's a lot of little insights distributed along the way. Steve Berlin-Johnson refers to that process as the slow hunch. There's a lot of little insights that accumulate along the way. That the stories that people tell about that single, like whammo, I've got it, those are usually just kind of made up afterwards. They're stories that are made after the fact. Les Demoiselles d'Avion, famous painting by Pablo Picasso. This is kind of the gold standard for creativity because it was revolutionary. It seemed to come from nowhere. It seemed to be unprecedented. But of course, the fact is that, it was a product of its time. It was a product of its influences. So there's influences from African art, from classical sculpture, from his contemporaries. What it, essentially is a provocative combination of things, of elements that were available to Picasso at the time. So those are some of the myths. So what's the reality? How do we actually make stuff? There are three basic elements. So this is a simplification, but I still think it's useful. It's certainly more useful than thinking it's magic and we don't know where it comes from. So the first thing you need to get is something called domain knowledge. So if your art, your culture, your science, whatever, if you think of that as a language, in order to communicate with that realm, you need to speak that language. So the way that you learn a language is just by talking like everybody else talks. Like you don't take those words and kind of just start doing your own thing with them. Like you learn to talk like everybody else talks. You just copy. So copying is sort of the fundamentals of creativity. This is how we learn. This is how we get started. And you can see this in the career of any artist. All artists, when they start out, are making derivative stuff. So Bob Dylan, for instance, looking crazy young here. Bob Dylan, his first album had 11 cover songs. Almost the entire album was cover tunes. And early in his career, he mostly seemed intent on being Woody Guthrie, not on being like his generation's Woody Guthrie, but on just being as close to Woody Guthrie as he possibly could be. Richard Pryor, famous stand-up from the 70s. Pryor, brought his own personal voice into the realm of stand-up comedy, which was kind of a square art form up until then. So he talked about, race and sex and drug abuse and street life. He just channeled this stuff from his life into stand-up comedy, and that hadn't been done before. But when he started out, he was basically doing like a bad impression of Bill Cosby. Like he wasn't even doing a good imitation. He was kind of doing a bad imitation of Bill Cosby. Cosby looks so sophisticated in this image, rather. Looks like he should be in a Wes Anderson movie. Hunter S. Thompson invented gonzo journalism. So he took the first-person voice of the novel, added it to journalism, and sort of subverted the idea that journalism could be impartial. But before that, he was just a conventional journalist. He wrote for newspapers. And in his spare time, he retyped a couple books. He retyped The Great Gatsby and A Farewell to Arms, like word for word, just sat down and retyped them just to get the feel of, a book coming through. So once you've done enough copying to have acquired domain knowledge, it's then possible to make something new, to start making new things through transformation. So taking existing stuff and producing variations of it. Probably a lot of variations. It tends to be very time consuming. So the steam engine, for instance, James Watt didn't just, have the idea out of the blue. He wasn't making tea or something and thought, hey, it'd be great if I could use this for mining, He was assigned to fix a steam engine that already existed. It was a gig. There was an engine by Thomas Newcomen, and after a while, it tended to stop working. It would work for a while, and then it would freeze up and stop working. He was supposed to fix that, and he fiddled with that design for 12 years before coming up with his version that triggered the Industrial Revolution. Typewriter, these were commonly referred to as literary pianos when they first came out, which I think is a great name. But, and they were called that because it was the only thing that you did this with, It was the only, hook that people had to put that idea on. So Christopher Latham Scholl's, his design was actually modeled on the piano. He started with 2 rows of keys, 1 row was higher than the other one, and that was his template. That was what he started with, and, he fiddled with that for 5 years and came up with the QWERTY layout, which we still use now, even though some people think it sucks. Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb. Light bulbs already existed, and his first patent application was actually turned down. It was considered to be infringing. His second one, the one that got approved, was called an improvement in electric lamp. So it wasn't called the electric lamp. It was an improvement to an existing design. So these are all major accomplishments, but they're not new. Typewriters and steam engines, light bulbs, those had all already been around. They weren't new things. So arguably, to make a greater leap to create things that do not currently exist, you need to have some element of combining. You need to be working with combinations rather than transformations. So, for instance, Albert Einstein discovered the formula E = mc squared. They didn't discover the E or the M or the C, the energy or the mass or the speed of light. Those were all, independent discoveries. What he discovered was that, they fit together in a remarkably simple way. Nobody else could see that before him. Printing press, this is an interesting one because these pieces had been around for centuries. So not just years, not just decades. The stuff was ancient already by the time Gutenberg came along. So paper, ink, movable type, those were all, they were very old, they've been around a long time. And the most important element was the screw press, which is what this guy's pulling on here, also ancient. But the reason it was inspired to get that in there was because it had nothing to do with printing. It was used for food production. It was used in Rome for making olive oil and wine. So that's referred to as exaptation commonly, so not adapting, exapting, taking an idea out of one place and bringing it into your realm. So Google has done plenty of that with academia. So something like 20% time that you guys do, that's adapted from what professors do, having a week a day to pursue their own studies. PageRank was inspired by citations in research. So the more incoming citations, the more incoming links, the more relevant that source is. So it was, all these parts were old, they were ancient, but it was the combination that created the big breakthrough. Tim Berners-Lee, inventor of the World Wide Web. But the World Wide Web is, kind of a hypertext interface for the net, and the net is kind of the ultimate combination technology. It's slowly evolved over the course of decades. It's a network of networks, and what Berners-Lee brought to it was that hypertext interface. And hypertext, he didn't have to invent that. That had been around for a long time, since the 60s. So copy, transform, and combine, those are kind of the basic elements of any kind of creativity. And it doesn't just apply to inventions, it also applies to entertainment and the arts. So in Star Wars, for instance, George Lucas was a huge movie nerd, and his influences found their way into the film, sometimes in very recognizable fashion. So here's another clip. This is from part 2 of Everything is Remix.
Even now, Star Wars endures as a work of impressive imagination, but many of its individual components are as recognizable as the samples in a remix. The foundation for Star Wars comes from Joseph Campbell. He popularized the structures of myth in his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Star Wars follows the outline of the monomyth, which consists of stages like the Call to Adventure, Supernatural Aid, the Belly of the Whale, the Road of Trials, the Meeting with the Goddess, and a bunch more. Also huge influences were the Flash Gordon serials from the 30s and Japanese director Akira Kurosawa. Star Wars plays much like an updated version of Flash Gordon, right down to the soft wipes and the opening titles design. From Kurosawa, we get masters of spiritual martial arts, a low-ranking bickering duo, more soft wipes, a beneath the floorboards hideaway, and a boastful baddie getting his arm chopped off.
You just watch yourself. We're wanted men. I have the death sentence on 12 systems.
War films and westerns were also huge sources for Star Wars. The scene where Luke discovers his slaughtered family resembles this scene from The Searchers. And the scene where Han Solo shoots Greedo resembles this scene from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The climactic airstrikes in the Dam Busters, 633 Squadron, and the bridges at Toko-Ri play very similarly to the run on the Death Star. And in many cases, existing shots were even used as templates for Star Wars special effects. There's also many other elements clearly derived from various films. We have a tin man like the Tin Woman in Metropolis, a couple shots inspired by 2001, a grab the girl and swing scene like this one in The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, a holographic projection kind of like the one in Forbidden Planet, a rally resembling this one in Triumph of the Will, and cute little robots much like those in Silent Running.
All right. So this notion that we are essentially remixing the work of others has a lot of implications on our ideas about creativity, originality. So, original ideas are considered property at this point, legally and ethically. And that's understandable to a great degree, because when you put a lot of time into something, months or years or whatever, it feels, in your gut very viscerally like it's yours, like it's all yours, like you made it, it's mine. But, it's not completely. And the reason we don't notice is because of something called loss aversion. Economists refer to this as loss aversion. So basically, we're wired to protect what we got. It's probably some sort of an evolutionary thing, the proto-humans who could hang on to their bananas were more likely to survive and mate. So we're wired towards protecting what we've got. So when you make something, when you're invested in it, you feel like it's yours. We get really territorial because we feel like it's all ours, like we completely did it. But that's just because we're not noticing the reverse. We're not wired to notice when we're taking from our peers, from our culture, from our domain, when we're doing all this copying, which is how we learn, we don't notice that we're doing it. We don't notice that part. We notice when people are taking it from us. So there are a couple things here that are distorting our perspective on the issue. First thing is this idea of the lone creator, the Beethovenish type singular genius. This is an idea I think it's in decline now. I don't think a lot of people who do creative work necessarily think like this anymore. And as we get more and more networked, I think it's becoming increasingly obvious that isn't actually how things happen. So it's an idea that's It's arced probably, it's starting to decline, and with this project and with these talks and stuff, I'm trying to kind of give it another nudge towards the door. Ideas of property is a much more resilient idea. I probably won't fix this here today at Google. So this is a doozy because, ideas aren't property. They're not tangible. You can't actually steal them. All you can do is copy them. You can't literally take somebody's idea. All you can do is copy it. And copying is different than stealing. I think we all acknowledge that copying is different than stealing. So, why is this so important if we think that ideas are property? Like, it seems like it's just a word, like who cares? what we say ideas are like it doesn't seem to matter that much, but it is important because, that's a visual metaphor, not a visual metaphor, it's a metaphor that you build upon. So if ideas are property, then property can be stolen. If something can be stolen, that's theft. What do we do with thieves? We punish them. So it kind of, it sets off this cascade, this series of dominoes that kind of indulges this bias that we already have because we're so attuned towards protecting the things that we've got. Ideas contain other ideas. That's how we make them. That's how we evolve. And that's why, intellectual property can get so complicated so fast. It can be unclear where one idea ends, where your idea ends, and the other idea begins. Ideas are, they're layered, they're interwoven, they're blurry. It's hard to tell the boundaries in this stuff. I'll show one more video clip here. This is from part 3. This shows how Apple built on the work of Xerox.
Eventually, Apple got a load of the Alto and later released not one, but 2 computers with graphical interfaces, the Lisa and its more successful follow-up, the Macintosh. The Alto was never a commercial product, but Xerox did release a system based on it in 1981, the Star 8010, 2 years before the Lisa, 3 years before the Mac. It was the Star and the Alto that served as the foundation for the Macintosh. The Xerox Star used a desktop metaphor with icons for documents and folders. It had a pointer, scroll bars, and pop-up menus. These were huge innovations, and the Mac copied every one of them. But it was the first combination it incorporated that set the Mac on a path towards long-term success. Apple aimed to merge the computer with the household appliance. The Mac was to be a simple device, like a TV or a stereo. This was unlike the Star, which was intended for professional use and vastly different from the cumbersome command-based systems that dominated the era. The Mac was for the home, and this produced a cascade of transformations. Firstly, Apple removed one of the buttons on the mouse to make its novel pointing device less confusing. Then they added the double click for opening files. The Star used a separate key to open files. The Mac also let you drag icons around and move and resize windows. The Star didn't have drag and drop. You moved and copied files by selecting an icon, pressing a key, then clicking a location. And you resized windows with a menu. The Star and the Alto both featured pop-up menus, but because the location of these would move around the screen, the user had to continually reorient. The Mac introduced the menu bar, which stayed in the same place no matter what you were doing. And the Mac added the trash can to make deleting files more intuitive and less nerve-wracking. And lastly, through compromise and clever engineering, Apple managed to pare the Mac's price down to $2,500. Still pretty expensive, but much cheaper than the $10,000 Lisa or the $17,000 Star. But what started it all was the graphical interface merged with the idea of the computer as household appliance. The Mac as a demonstration of the explosive potential of combinations. The Star and the Alto, on the other hand, are the products of years of elite research and development. They're a testament to the slow power of transformation. But of course, they too contain the work of others. The Alto and the Star are evolutionary branches that lead back to the NLS system, which introduced Windows and the mouse, to Sketchpad, the first interactive drawing application, and even back to the Memex, a concept resembling the modern PC decades before it was possible.
You can actually see hypertext working, by the way, in that Douglas Engelbart clip there that I showed near the end. So I'll wrap with a quote. I like this a lot. This is kind of at the heart of what I'm trying to do with this project. So by idolizing those whom we honor, we do a disservice both to them and to ourselves. We fail to recognize that we could go and do likewise. Charles V. Willey, he's a sociologist at Harvard. So that's where I want to go with this thing. I'm not trying to produce some sort of a anti-copyright screed, because I think that's, it's hopeless. Like, you may as well go to the beach and scream at the ocean. Like, it's not going to go anywhere, I don't think. What I'm trying to do is show that, our achievements are interconnected, are networked, and that, doing something like a silly little remix video and uploading it to YouTube, when you do something like that, you're dipping a toe in the same pool as all these guys. You're taking the first little baby steps, towards doing real work, doing original work. And that's what I want to encourage people to do. I want them to understand that copying, transforming, and combining, those are the basic elements. If you start using them and you keep using them, who knows what you can do. It's like the copy, transform, and combine is like the ABCs of creativity, and I'd like to spread that message. That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Kirby.
Sorry about that.
I think we'll actually be taking questions if you want to hang out at the mic for a few minutes. So
yeah.
if you have questions, please come up to the mic so that the YouTube audience can benefit from them as well. And I'll start us off with a couple, but feel free to line up behind. You kind of poke at the ideas or property concept. I'd like to dig in that a bit more, because that concept is it's sometimes credited as being a fundamental part of how American capitalism and democracy worked so well, especially in the early days.
Right.
The notion of the small business and the entrepreneur being able to claim his own property and run with it first. And I mean, all this comes back to and make a little scratch at it before anybody else can really take that idea. So,
yes.
I mean, if you don't think ideas are property, how does an idea relate to making some money to the person who's credited for at least coming up with that iteration of it?
Well, I just think we need to think of it differently. Like, I'm not saying I don't believe in copyright or patents, but those were originally thought of as monopolies. They were thought of as short-term monopolies. So they weren't thought of as property. To me, property suggests it's mine, came from me, mine forever. So I think we just need to shift over towards that. It's funny, when you look at copyright history in the United States, it's amazing how much they seemingly had right from the beginning. Like, it was a very streamlined piece of legislation, like it basically protected people against getting ripped off, against people just taking your thing and knocking it off, But if you were, taking pieces of stuff or whatever, even translations were not considered infringing. And there was a famous case for a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, where somebody translated into German. They took that person to court, and it was considered non-infringing because they were producing value. Like, hey, now people in Germany can read it. That's great. So it was a very, it was a tight little piece of legislation. It just protected people from the egregious stuff, and I just think it's snowballed. So I think a lot was right in the beginning, and it's gotten out of hand. It's gotten too expansive. It's gotten bloated, and the idea has become distorted. It's no longer, it's no longer about just protecting your thing temporarily. It's about it's mine forever, hands off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you point to some good reasons to have like some law. I mean, clearly we have to protect people for a short amount of time, but then you get to a state like today where patent litigation is overwhelming the courts and just filing patents. There's a huge backlog.
Yeah.
So, can you at least point to a core of what is good about patent legislation? Because, when you have companies buying patents to protect their own, and this is done throughout the tech
I've heard
industry.
that happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is done throughout the tech industry, but this is also done just abroad in general. When you've got companies buying patents to protect their own interests, and you've got companies claiming that a patent should be good till past the life of the creator, and they call the creator the corporation. So it has to be like past the life of the. I mean, we've got, I think, Walt Disney as a shining example of that.
Yes.
So there's a good core in there somewhere. Do you have a sense of where that is?
For patents or for copyrights?
For the idea of patent, litigation around patents and protecting what's.
I don't find patents generally to be that problematic. Software patents, I think, are like the real sore thumb. Like, those are the ones that really stand out as being grossly dysfunctional. Software patents and business method patents. And I think just because there's too big a divide between what the patent actually is and what you're actually delivering at the end of the day. It's not like you made a physical thing and here's a blueprint, here's how it works. So it's sort of, I don't know, like a patent for software. It's sort of like an outline or something of what you're actually going to do. You can't, like, the way patents are supposed to work is you can take that patent and you can, if you have reasonable skill in that area, you can make that thing. You could do multi-touch supposedly if you, well, maybe not, but it doesn't work that way with software. If you look at that patent, I mean, that's not going to help you at all to actually make something. So I think because software is abstract, because it's not literally anything, that one software patents and business method patents, those ones seem to be really problematic. But then the rest of, the duration hasn't really expanded that much for patents too. They've kept it pretty tight. I think it's only, maybe 5 years. I don't know, I'm making that up actually. It's only a little bit longer than it was originally, whereas copyrights have they were 14 years originally. And now it's basically 2 lifetimes. So patents, I think, that there's plenty going on there that is not problematic. I think in software is a real mess right now though. So I think it's more about just looking at a couple areas of patents.
How do the elements of copying, transforming, and combining apply to everything as a remix itself?
Oh, so I'm sorry, what was that?
How do the copying, transforming, and combining apply to everything as a remix?
Actually making it?
To your actual project?
It is remixed, and not just that I'm using other people's music and other people's visuals and all that. The ideas, for the most part, aren't actually mine. I just read a lot of books, and I kind of, I chose my own story to tell with it. So it is a remix. That's how I actually built it. So it's the theory, and it's also the practice. Specifically, mostly I read authors and work there, make their ideas nice and accessible and visualize them. I think that's really what I'm doing. I'm kind of adapting authors. Thanks a lot.
So I kind of find it sad that there's no originality, and I was just struck by, with hindsight, everything can be seem a copy. You can look at Star Wars and look at every film that got made between whenever film was invented, 20, whenever it was, and 1974, whatever, and then find a scene which matches up and go, aha, it was a copy. Or you can find every idea from the Renaissance back to ancient Greece, and ancient Greeks can't have invented everything. So I guess I'm just...
No, they did. That's my thesis. That's where I'm going with this.
To me, there's a distinction between, similarities and similar things and actual copying. And just, can you spend a minute talking about, and maybe pick up my spirit? So it's possible to be truly original in creative, the way classically we probably all think about creativity. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I don't think the way that we classically think of originality exists. I really don't think that it's like, some people thought that Picasso's work just came from sort of nowhere, out of the blue, and that's just not the way stuff happens. So there is still originality. I think just in kind of a different sense. It's more about kind of doing unprecedented combinations. Of existing stuff. So I think it's a kind of originality because it doesn't, resemble other people's stuff. But of course it came from somewhere. So I think we just have to, I think originality doesn't have to contain this idea that it came out of the blue, that it came from nowhere, that it's magical or mystical somehow. It's just, it's work that doesn't look like anything else. Was there another part of that question?
No, I don't know.
Oh, that original.
That was good. Thank you.
All right, cool. Thanks.
I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about the origins of your project.
Okay.
What got you interested in it, and what got you to create the films? In particular, I'm interested in the antecedents of my favorite part. Sorry about colonialism.
Oh, cool.
But just in general.
Yeah, it came about. The idea started percolating when there was a whole bunch of crazy copyright cases going on. There was one about Harry Potter, and that one was about this guy who had a scene in his book where a wizard solved a problem in a bathtub, and then that was in, I don't know Harry Potter well, but that's in one of the Harry Potter books, and he sued over that. There was one against Coldplay. It was a very basic melody that this heavy metal guitarist named Joe Satriani thought was taken from him. I really doubt they listened to Joe Satriani personally. I think that's a coincidence. But I'm going to throw one last thing in. So actually, when things match up, that's what I was going to say. It doesn't necessarily mean you copied it too. Like at the end of the third part of this, I talk about something called multiple discovery. So people do, we're all kind of using the same materials, we're all drinking from the same well. So people do come up with things that either are things like things that came way before them, or things that came out, that happen to pop out at the same time. So there is coincidence involved for sure too. Like people come up with the same stuff even though they didn't copy it. So Harry Potter, Coldplay, Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code, somebody sued him. The people who wrote a nonfiction book about some of that stuff, they sued him because they thought he ripped off their book. But that's strange too because it's nonfiction. Like, I mean, where did you get the stuff from? You didn't, you know. So there were all these kind of wacky cases going on. This was around the period too. Like, copyright had just gotten weird at this point. There was all sorts of, there was crazy stuff going on YouTube with takedowns. You know, like the Stephanie Lenz case, where she had her baby dancing to Prince to Let's Go Crazy, and that got pulled down. It was in the background, like you could barely hear it. Like, nobody's gonna get that version of Let's Go Crazy and think, oh, I'm not gonna buy that now. I've got 15 seconds of it from this YouTube video. So there was a lot of wacky stuff going on at that time, and I started to think, well, why do people think that they own these things all of a sudden? You know, like, it seems to be kind of getting weirdly common that people think like, hey, wizards in bathtubs, that's my thing, you know. So I wanted to explore that, you know, and you know, I thought it was hypocritical for people to think like that, and I thought I could demonstrate it in a fun way. So Zeppelin and Lucas were the first couple examples that came up. The sorry about colonialism thing, I have no clue where that came from. I'm sorry. That's in part 2, by the way, if you want to check that out later. Thanks a lot. Yes, sir.
So when you kind of started your presentation, you were talking about people seeking ideas and finding ideas kind of as a very physical thing. Right. As the world becomes digital and all these ideas become manifested in a digital format, it's easier for people to find things, remix, copy, like you were saying. How important are organizations like Creative Commons and the web in like facilitating then this remixing? Because that kind of is the progress that's pushing us forward if it's not true originality. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. What do I say about Creative Commons? I think it's really, unfortunately, it's not law. It's not actual legislation, Creative Commons. That's the fly in the ointment with me. I think it's great that people have this alternative route they can take. But it seems to me like most people, for the licenses, I forget which license it is, but they pick the license where you can distribute it, but you can't sell it. They might let you do stuff with it, but it seems to me, like with TED, for instance, some of the bigger examples of people using Creative Commons, they're just letting you distribute it, which I don't think is that big a deal. Like, you can do that with a Hulu video or a YouTube video or whatever. Like, I just don't think that's that big a deal. I think it's great that alternative exists. I think it's unfortunate that I'd like to see us maybe use some of that thinking in actual legislation. I think there's simple things that we could do in law that would make these systems a lot less trouble. Like, if the term of copyright were, I don't know if this will ever happen, but if it were shorter somehow, I think that would really help. Like, a couple lifetimes is really, I just don't think it's incentivizing anybody to make stuff that you're thinking like, hey, my grandkid might make $15 off this. Because the fact is, for most stuff, it's not worth anything immediately. You make it, you write a book, you put it out there, it's immediately worth nothing. Like, nobody cares. So that these things are protected for a couple lifetimes seems excessive. I support Creative Commons. I like them. I love that alternative exists, but it does feel like kind of a separate world. And I don't think there's a lot of great stuff happening in it. I don't think there's been I'm not aware of a lot of great work that's emerged from it, unfortunately. Sorry, Creative Commons. I do love them, though. Thanks.
When you were talking about the inventions, like, you know, the steam engine, well, that was based on a previous steam engine, and presumably that one was based on other stuff, too. Right. It struck me, you know, sort of the similarity between this stuff and evolution, right?
Yeah, sure, like, absolutely.
Was there a first monkey?
Yes.
You know, no, right? Because that whatever that was came from something else, so somehow people came from amoebas or whatever. Right. And I don't know.
Well, that does come up in the series, I'll say that. Yeah, I mean, it could have, like, the hook, so I called it Everything is Remix. I decided to tell these stories through the idea that creativity is kind of like remixing, but I could have somehow used, I don't know how exactly, but I could have used the idea of evolution. It's very similar for sure. Like the basic processes of evolution. So with the earliest forms of life, they were copying, and then when the transformations happen by mistake, you know, so it's evolution is blind, right?
And
so
presumably they're small transformations.
Yeah, exactly. And then over time, and then, you know, with sexual reproduction, you have, you know, combining of genes, so...
but no one was making money on the first owl.
What's that?
Nobody made money on the first owl.
Like, no.
That's, I think, where the difference.
Right, yeah.
Anyway.
All right, thanks a lot.
Hey.
Hey there.
As ideas get more popular, they tend to get more scrutiny from, you know, people wanting to get money from it.
Sorry, what was?
Sorry, as ideas get more popular,
yes,
more people scrutinize them and want
yes.
to, you know, lay claims to something. Have you noticed as your videos have gotten more popular, have people come after you? Are there any?
No, nothing's happened yet. You mean with like cease and desists and stuff like that?
Yeah, or any you know, holders.
People get. I get more
more
bitchy people complaining about it, for sure. I get more complaints about, you know, people just being very specific about certain things. I haven't even had a takedown. I haven't had anything like that. So no, it seems like because it's educational, I think people just kind of look the other way for the most part. But also because it's non-commercial, I'm just putting it out there for free. I think you can also get away with a lot. So there is sort of a level of sanity that has emerged in actual practice of this stuff, where it seems like if you're not trying to make money, if you're not just spitting out the content, if you're not just copying it and putting it out there, like if you're trying to do something with it, then it seems like for the most part, corporations are willing to look the other way. So no, nothing has happened, and I think that's heartening. I think that's a good thing.
Good to hear.
Thanks.
I'll finish with one last question, unless anyone have any others. It's kind of interesting that you brought up that point last, but if you're not trying to make money, then
right.
But as you think you've welcomely admitted, is that you've been supported by an audience and fans to produce this content, so you find it valuable, and we've also gotten a sense that, you know, if you want to be an artist, one of the most modern and cutting edge ways to do this is to kind of crowdsource from people who kind of have faith in what you're about to do. So, do you think that is almost an out, like using the community as benefactors is an out for creating art that can go public? Is this almost kind of like a backdoor exit for artists who want to possibly use other materials?
To make money off remixing?
Well, not make money off remixing, make money off a community who believe in what you're doing and put what you remixed out for free.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like some of the mashup guys. Like Greg, like Girl Talk, and the Kleptones, like their music is technically illegal, probably. If Girl Talk, I know he hasn't been to court or whatever, and he actually claims that the songs are his. He puts his name on the tunes, but I think if he put that stuff in a commercial or something like that, or a movie, I think he'd get nailed pretty fast, and I don't think it would go well. So, but he can make money from live performances, right? So it seems like if you put the media out there for free and then you're making your money some other kind of way, that's a viable model. I think, I'm forgetting examples, but there's certainly plenty of people that are doing stuff like that. And that's the route that I totally want to go. Like with the thing that comes after this series, that's totally what I want to do. I want to finance it up front, put it out there for free, so everybody around the world can watch it right away in all sorts of languages. And that's the model that I want to use going forward. That's what I want to explore.
Cool. It's a very interesting and inspiring model. So thanks again, Kirby Ferguson.
Thanks, everybody.